Well, this matters for various reasons. I've always been and will remain committed to supporting education across the board, including our excellent state schools, and I want all schools to be adequately funded and present opportunities for children from all backgrounds. And I say this as someone who was proudly educated in state schools and who cares about the life chances of everyone. I've secured this specific debate to highlight how Labour's ideologically driven plan to remove VAT and business rate exemptions for independent schools is an inherently flawed policy. If Labour won't abandon the education tax, I will also suggest some improvements that the government could make to lessen the impact of this policy, both on pupils, parents, school staff, both in Bromsgrove and across the country. Education is an investment in our future. It's in everyone's best interest that children are well educated so that they can make an engaged and positive contribution to our society. We don't charge VAT on many types of private healthcare, as that is beneficial when people use their own money to pay for a service that the state could otherwise provide. We don't charge VAT on university or nursery fees, so why should schooling be any different? There are approximately 2,500 independent schools in the UK, educating more than 500,000 children. They are often small schools. More than 40% of independent schools have fewer than 100 pupils, according to DfE data. And the reality is that this policy won't fulfil its aims and will displace children mid-education. State education must be funded by the state, supported by taxpayers. The VAT exemption encourages greater use of independent education, thus reducing the number of state school pupils, meaning more money available per pupil in the state sector. And the Times recently stated that 71% of parents felt that rising school fees would influence their future decision about independent schooling, and additionally, 26% of parents have said that they would have to withdraw children from independent schools if VAT is introduced. An Adam Smith Institute report provides a detailed examination of the potential economic impacts. If 10 to 15% of students transfer, the net revenue could be negligible. But alarmingly, in a scenario where 25% of students switch from the independent sector into state schools, this tax could cost the government £1.6 billion. Currently, independent schools' significant economic benefits include supporting 328,000 jobs, saving £4.4 billion from the education budget, and supports £5.1 billion in additional tax revenue. They do this while saving the state £4.5 billion by removing the requirement to fund the education of 7% of children through parents exercising this choice. And furthermore, independent and state boarding schools are a unique subset of the school system, with the additional feature of attracting overseas students to the UK. 62,700 pupils are international students in independent schools, making 11% of the population. This is a key export for the country, adding £2.1 billion to our economy annually. Independent schools should be seen as a British success story, both culturally and economically, instead of being discouraged and punished by imposing an education tax for socialist ideological principles. But most importantly, the human impact of this policy is stark. The failure of this education tax will not just be academic or financial, it will have serious impacts on families. One parent in my constituency wrote to me stating that as a widowed single mother who works full-time, I make enormous financial sacrifices to ensure my child can attend the same school from age 3 to 18. This stability is not only essential for my child's development, but also enables me to work and contribute to society. This proposed VAT would be devastating for families like mine. Another mother wrote to me and said, "We also have a daughter who will need to start secondary school in 2 years. We'd hoped for her to attend the same school as her brother, but with no scholarship likely and the addition of VAT, it is impossible. This is a painful realisation, and I worry that she will resent the opportunities that we could not give her, but which we could give her older sibling." Chairman, we've yet to talk about the impact on special educational needs and disabilities education. This will cause particular problems for children who are in receipt of such bespoke education. Nationally, at least 130,000 pupils in independent schools receive SEND support in mainstream and specialist settings. This is 20% of the pupils in UK independent schools, and that is slightly higher than the state school average. Independent schools help provide additional value-adding capacity to SEND education. There is simply not the capacity in the state sector to accommodate all of these extra pupils, particularly when SEND services are under significant pressure already. Capacity isn't there. We've seen already in the last few months since this Parliament began, that there are several SEND debates which have been convened to highlight the issues relating to SEND capacity. One other mother wrote to me to outline the benefit that these independent schools can have on children with SEND needs. I quote, "We moved our autistic child to a small independent school and the transformation was immediate. Classes are small and quiet, the school is very nurturing and family-oriented. It's been wonderful to see her blossom and slowly get more and more involved in school life. We would not have chosen for our daughter to go to private school, but there was no suitable state provision available. We're paying a significant amount of money to be able to do this. Adding VAT on top feels like we're being punished twice for having a child that doesn't fit into the state system, either in mainstream or specialist schools." The comments made by the Education Secretary over the weekend on Twitter really epitomise the mask of this government slipping, socialism revealing its true face, and it epitomises how reprehensible this policy is. Adjacent to SEND schools, we've got faith education to consider. This education tax will make independent faith schooling unaffordable for many families, hurting the 370,000 pupils that attend independent faith schools in England, according to Department for Education figures. It's important for this House to note that fees at these schools are frequently below the independent school average and sometimes below state per pupil funding levels. Often these schools have a suggested fee, but the community supports that those who can't afford the full fee by themselves. We've also yet to talk about military families. Military and diplomatic service families need boarding schools to provide a stable education while parents are deployed overseas. 4,700 children are funded by the government under the Continuity of Education Allowance, which assists service personnel in diplomatic families in educating their children at boarding school. Labour committed in the House of Commons in 2023 that armed forces families need not be concerned about proposals to charge VAT. With the current retention crisis in the armed forces and the current volatile state of world affairs, the government needs to confirm what impact analysis has been carried out on the effect of taxing education on military personnel. And then, Chairman, we get into issues around the implementation of the policy. Implementation in January will put pressure on local authorities to find rare and academically disruptive in-year placements. These will be difficult as state schools will be full. Many will be oversubscribed, with areas that have a high number of pupils attending independent schools also having some of the busiest state schools. The government have shown the true intent of this policy over the weekend, this divisive us and them mentality that was revealed on social media. So, Chairman, I call on the government to pause and reconsider this education tax with a view to abandoning it. It is unethical and will damage a British success story and won't fulfil its stated aims. The policy will not raise significant money, but is being forced through at the expense of state and independent school children to further the government's divisive ideological agenda that so many in this House have recognised. Failing this, if they refuse to abandon this policy, there are some sensible and practical steps that they can take to minimise the impact that it will have on parents and children. Firstly, the imposition of VAT should be delayed until September and the start of the next academic year. There has been no proper impact assessment of these policies on state schools, SEND provision or faith schooling. A full consultation and impact assessment is needed before changes are announced. Secondly, assess how very small schools can be protected from VAT and tax changes. They are a vital community resource and charge much lower fees. This should be acknowledged. Thirdly, exempt service families on continuity of education allowance from VAT. Those who rely on independent education to serve our country should absolutely not be penalised. The government should protect children who are currently applying for an ECHP, as parents shouldn't be penalised for the delays in the process. And I would like the Minister to provide clarity on the following points. Will the government be issuing guidance for state schools on how to deal with applications from parents and to prevent parents from being asked to prove that they cannot afford to fund independent education? The member for Islington South and Finsbury commented during the general election campaign that that state sector classes must increase when they just have to cope. What assessment has the government done to determine whether state sector classes have the resources available? And for students transitioning from the independent to state sector, what provision will there be to prevent disruption to their education in subjects which may not be taught at their new state school? Will academic leniency be granted to students in the event of academic performance failures due to the disruption caused by transitioning between schools? I also seek clarity on what funding and support will be made available for students with special educational needs who are transitioning between independent and state sectors. I hope that this House will clearly appreciate that this short-sighted policy will hit hardest those in society who it claims to be supporting, that it will damage the wider education sector as a whole and will worsen academic and social inequalities whilst being a net cost to society, the education sector and the British taxpayer. Yeah.